In the vast heart of North America lies a land where the earth itself seems to resist life. Blistering days where the sun burns without mercy, nights where the cold cuts as sharply as stone, and endless dunes of shifting sand that conceal both danger and secret refuge. For thousands of years, native peoples called this place home. While others might have seen only desolation, they discovered pathways of survival, hidden springs, desert plants that held water in their veins, and strategies woven from patience and deep observation of the land. In this unforgiving desert, survival was never an accident. It was knowledge, shared across generations, carried in stories, rituals, and daily labor. Here, every shadow, every rock, and every gust of wind could mean the difference between life and death. This is the story of how Native Americans endured the harshest deserts of North America, and how their wisdom turned the impossible into survival. The desert is a land of contradictions. At first glance, it looks barren, a place where nothing can endure. Yet to those who walked its paths for centuries, the desert was alive with patterns, rhythms, and hidden sources of life. The relentless sun, hanging like a blazing crown in the sky, seemed to strip the land of all generosity. Days stretched long, filled with shimmering heat that bent the horizon, making distant ridges appear to move like ghosts. But the native peoples of these lands did not see only the emptiness. They saw signs in the flight of birds, in the tracks pressed lightly into the sand, in the color of clouds, and in the silence of the wind. For them, the desert was not only an obstacle, it was a teacher, demanding respect and rewarding those who listened carefully. Generations passed their knowledge forward like a flame, never letting it go out. Children were taught from their earliest days to notice the smallest details, the way the ground cooled before sunrise, the call of certain insects before the heat of midday, or the soft green tint that might signal water below. Every lesson was survival, every observation a tool. These were not tricks of chance, but knowledge woven deeply into tradition, repeated and remembered across centuries. The struggle for water defined life in these deserts. Streams were rare, and rain came like a miracle, sometimes not falling for months at a time. To survive, native tribes learned the secrets of the land's veins. They followed the paths of animals to hidden springs, dug deep into dry riverbeds to uncover slow trickles of groundwater, and carved ingenious storage systems to keep what little they found. Clay jars sealed carefully with resin, shaded beneath rock shelters, held precious drops that could mean the difference between life and death. And when water was discovered, it was treated not as property, but as a sacred gift. Rituals were whispered to honor the spirit of the spring, for taking without gratitude was thought to anger the desert itself. The desert is a land of contradictions. At first glance, it looks barren, a place where nothing can endure. Yet to those who walked its paths for centuries, the desert was alive with patterns, rhythms, and hidden sources of life. The relentless sun, hanging like a blazing crown in the sky, seemed to strip the land of all generosity. Days stretched long, filled with shimmering heat that bent the horizon, making distant ridges appear to move like ghosts. But the native peoples of these lands did not see only the emptiness. They saw signs in the flight of birds, in the tracks pressed lightly into the sand, in the color of clouds, and in the silence of the wind. For them, the desert was not only an obstacle, it was a teacher, demanding respect and rewarding those who listened carefully. Food was another test of patience and wisdom. Hunting in the open desert was dangerous, for the sun drained strength as quickly as hunger did. Men set out at dawn or dusk, tracking jackrabbits, desert bighorn sheep, or quail, their silhouettes blending with the stones and brush. Women gathered desert plants with practiced hands, mesquite pods, prickly pear fruit, yucca roots, and cactus seeds. Each plant required knowledge: when to pick, how to prepare, how to make the inedible safe. Nothing was wasted. Every fiber, every seed, every drop of juice served a purpose. A single cactus could feed, heal, and even quench thirst. But survival was never only about the body, it was also about the spirit. The desert could break a person with its silence and its endless horizons. To stand against it, people turned to rituals, songs, and community. Around the fire at night, when the air cooled and the stars blanketed the sky, stories gave strength. They told of ancestors who crossed the same sands, of spirits who guarded the springs, of lessons carved into stone by time. These stories were not simply entertainment, they were survival guides dressed in memory and myth, teaching courage, patience, and balance. They reminded each generation that the desert was not an enemy, but a test, one that could be passed only by unity and respect. And so, day after day, year after year, the people endured. They endured the blazing suns, the freezing nights, the long hunger, and the parched throats. They did not endure by accident, but by choice, guided by the wisdom of countless lives before them. To walk in their footsteps is to see the desert anew, not as a wasteland, but as a vast book of survival, its pages written in wind, stone, and fire. The desert sky was not only a ceiling of fire by day and cold stars by night, it was also a map. Native peoples of these lands learned to read it like a book, finding directions in the constellations and guidance in the rising and setting sun. When the earth offered no roads, the heavens became their compass. Travelers crossing barren plains knew which stars rose above the mountains that hid scarce water or which constellations pointed toward distant canyons. Each night, the stories of the stars were repeated not only as myth, but as a reminder of direction, of survival. In these skies, memory and navigation were bound together, so that even a child looking upward could glimpse the knowledge of generations. The desert, for all its harshness, demanded movement. To stay in one place too long was to risk death when water ran out or plants shriveled. Entire families traveled along hidden routes, following seasonal rains, migrating animals, and the ripening of desert plants. This rhythm of movement was not random but carefully timed. Campsites were chosen near rocky shelters or dry riverbeds, where the chance of finding water was highest. Footprints disappeared quickly in the windblown sand, but memory carried the paths. To outsiders, the desert seemed trackless, but to those born of it, invisible roads stretched in every direction. The people's bond with animals was another thread of survival. Desert bighorn sheep leapt among the cliffs, leading hunters to places where no man would dare go. Jackrabbits provided not only food, but skins that could be stitched into clothing against cold nights. Even the smallest creatures, such as lizards or insects, became vital in lean times. But hunting was never thought of as conquest. Each life taken was honored with words of thanks, gestures to the sky or the earth. This gratitude was not only spiritual, it was practical. To overhunt in such a fragile land was to invite starvation. Balance meant survival. Plants, too, formed a living library. Yucca leaves became fibers for ropes and sandals, agave hearts roasted for food, prickly pear pads turned into healing poultices. Mesquite pods ground into flour fed entire families. Even desert flowers that bloomed only for a short season carried secrets. Medicine for fever, salves for wounds, or teas that soothed thirst. Nothing was wasted. To know the plants was to know the desert's generosity, hidden beneath its cruel face. This knowledge was so precise that a misstep could mean poison, while correct preparation could mean life extended another season. Shelter was another mastery. With no forests to cut, tribes turned to stone, brush, and the land itself. Caves offered protection where they could be found. Elsewhere, homes were shaped from packed earth, mud, or woven reeds plastered with clay. These structures cooled under the day's relentless sun and held warmth through the bitter night. Ingenious windbreaks of brush and stone kept blowing sand at bay. Clothing, too, was adapted to extremes. Lightweight materials allowed the body to breathe in scorching heat, while animal hides layered at night preserved warmth. Every stitch was part of the great adaptation, making survival possible in a world that shifted from burning to freezing in the span of hours. But perhaps the greatest skill was patience. The desert tested endurance more than strength, waiting more than action. To pause at midday, seeking shade beneath a rock ledge rather than wasting strength, was wisdom. To walk at dawn or dusk, when the land softened, was wisdom. To store food slowly, seed by seed, for a season of drought was wisdom. In this way, the native peoples turned patience into survival itself. They did not fight the desert, they flowed with it. They learned to match its rhythm, to let its cruelty sharpen their senses instead of crushing them. In the silence of the sands, they discovered that endurance was not the absence of struggle, but the art of living within it. The desert winds carried more than sand. They carried stories of survival etched into the very landscape. Over centuries, the people came to know every canyon, every hidden path, and every shifting dune as though they were markings in a sacred book. The land spoke in subtle ways, and they learned to listen. The distant call of a bird might reveal water. The sudden silence of insects might warn of a predator. The smell of rain on the horizon, carried for miles, was a signal to prepare. What others dismissed as empty wasteland was, for them, a living map written in sound, scent, and movement. The desert was harsh, but it was never silent, and its whispers became their guide. Hunting in these lands was never a simple pursuit. The wide openness of the desert made stealth difficult, yet it was here that skill shone brightest. Hunters learned to blend with rock and shadow, to move with the patience of stone. Some carried simple spears, others used atlatls to hurl darts with deadly accuracy. Their knowledge of animal behavior was as crucial as any weapon. They studied where deer came to drink, where quail sought shade, where rabbits dug their shallow burrows. A single hunt could last hours or even days, and success was measured not in trophies but in sustenance. Every animal taken meant that the family, the tribe, would see another day of life. But survival in the desert demanded more than tools and tactics. It demanded cooperation. Few could endure its trials alone. Men, women, and children shared the weight of existence equally, their roles distinct but intertwined. While hunters tracked prey, gatherers secured plants and seeds. While elders watched the horizon for signs of change, children fetched water or carried firewood. A tribe's strength was not measured by numbers alone, but by unity. A single mistake, water spilled, food spoiled, fire left untended, could threaten all. In this way, survival bound them together with bonds stronger than stone, for the desert punished weakness and rewarded only harmony. But survival in the desert demanded more than tools and tactics. It demanded cooperation. Few could endure its trials alone. Men, women, and children shared the weight of existence equally, their roles distinct but intertwined. While hunters tracked prey, gatherers secured plants and seeds. While elders watched the horizon for signs of change, children fetched water or carried firewood. A tribe's strength was not measured by numbers alone, but by unity. A single mistake, water spilled, food spoiled, fire left untended, could threaten all. In this way, survival bound them together with bonds stronger than stone, for the desert punished weakness and rewarded only harmony. Fire itself was a companion, a guardian, and a teacher. To keep it alive was to carry warmth, protection, and light into the most unforgiving nights. Sparks coaxed from stone or ember, carried carefully in containers, became the difference between life and death. Fire kept predators at bay, cooked food, warmed cold bones, and turned bitter roots edible. Around it, voices rose in song, prayers were spoken, and silence was shared. It was more than flame. It was a thread linking each night to the one before, a promise that no matter how dark the desert grew, the people would endure. To lose fire was to lose hope, and so every hand learned how to tend it, feed it, and keep it alive. The desert also shaped how they moved through time. Unlike fertile valleys where abundance gave leisure, here every moment demanded purpose. Dawn was for walking, for gathering, for hunting. Midday was for shade and patience. Evening was for cooking, teaching, and remembering. The rhythm of life was carved by necessity, but it created a balance as delicate as it was strong. The desert allowed no waste of effort, no careless distraction. It demanded attention and discipline, shaping not only survival, but culture itself. To live here was to live with intention, every breath measured, every step chosen. And always beneath it all, there was reverence. To survive in such a place without honoring it was unthinkable. Songs were sung to the winds, prayers whispered to the stones, offerings left near springs and hunting grounds. Gratitude was the thread that bound daily life, a constant reminder that survival was never guaranteed, only granted. The people did not conquer the desert, nor did they bow to it. Instead, they entered into a relationship, harsh yet sacred. They gave respect, And in return, the desert gave survival. And in that balance, they found not only endurance, but meaning. The desert was more than a place of survival. It was a place of testing. Every day brought a challenge, and every challenge demanded a lesson. When storms swept across the horizon, walls of dust rising higher than mountains, the people endured by turning their backs to the wind and shielding their faces with woven cloth. They had learned to wait, to let the storm pass, for no force of man could resist the desert's fury. Children were taught not to fear the roar of the sky or the sting of sand against their skin, but to see it as another teacher, reminding them of the power that lay all around. The desert punished recklessness, but it rewarded patience, and patience was a lesson etched deeply into the hearts of those who called it home. Seasons brought their own trials. In summer, the sun scorched so fiercely that even shadows offered little comfort. Days were measured in endurance, and water became the most sacred treasure. In winter, the desert revealed another face, its nights turning bitterly cold, frost settling on stones, and wind slicing like knives. Clothing had to shift with the seasons, hides layered for warmth, lighter fibers woven for the burning months. The people understood the rhythm of heat and cold as a cycle of balance. To thrive in this land was to honor both extremes, never underestimating the cruelty of either. Adaptation was not a single act, but a way of life, repeated with every turning of the year. Even the smallest creatures carried lessons. The lizard basking on a rock taught where the sun first touched. The flight of ravens marked where food might be found. Ants, patient and tireless, revealed how to store for the future. Watching animals was not curiosity, it was survival. The people imitated what they saw, learning not only where to find life, but how to live with it. The desert was shared, not owned, and every being within it carried wisdom. To walk with open eyes was to carry countless teachers beside you, each one showing how to endure. Community, too, became a shield against the harshness of the land. No one survived the desert alone, and the bonds of kinship were stronger than the hunger of the sands. When food was found, it was shared. When water was drawn, all drank. When danger came, all stood together. A single hunter might fall, but the tribe endured. Elders guided, mothers taught, children carried the memory of tomorrow. The desert's harshness demanded unity, and unity gave meaning. To be part of the tribe was to be part of the desert itself. Each person a strand in the web of survival, each life a note in the same unending song. The land also demanded resilience of spirit. A person might go hungry, yet still share a meal. A person might be weary, yet still rise to tend the fire. Strength was measured not only in muscle, but in the will to continue when nothing remained. The desert stripped away all excess, leaving only truth. It revealed who could endure, who could adapt, who could honor the balance. And within this stripping away, something deeper was found. A clarity of purpose, a strength rooted not in defiance, but in harmony with the land itself. To survive here was not to fight the desert, but to become part of it, bone and breath joined to stone and wind. And so, generation after generation, the lessons held. Children born beneath the sun grew into hunters, gatherers, and teachers. The stories of survival, of storms endured and water found, were passed on around the fire and etched into memory. The desert, harsh and merciless to outsiders, was to them a home shaped by struggle, by patience, by wisdom. They did not see themselves as victims of the land, nor masters of it, but as companions walking the same path. In this companionship lay their greatest strength, for the desert might break the unprepared, but for those who knew its ways, it gave a life unlike any other, raw, demanding, but deeply alive. The desert was also a keeper of silence, and in that silence the people found strength. Where others might hear emptiness, they heard the soft rhythm of wind, the faint crack of stone as it cooled, the distant call of an owl in the night. These sounds became the heartbeat of their world. Silence was never empty, it was filled with meaning. In it, the people listened to themselves, to their ancestors, and to the desert itself. It was in this quiet that choices were made, patience was learned, and the balance of life revealed itself. To sit in silence was not weakness, but wisdom. a way of drawing closer to the spirit of the land that sustained them. In the dry earth, the people also found traces of those who came before. Petroglyphs carved into stone told of hunts, of stars, of spirits that guided survival. Rock shelters carried soot marks from fires long extinguished, yet still speaking of warmth shared by ancestors. Every trail, every cracked boulder, every weathered carving was a reminder that they walked paths that had been walked for centuries. Their survival was not only their own, it was part of a chain, a lineage bound to the land through memory. To step into the desert was to step into history itself, a story carved into stone and sand. Water continued to define their lives, but over time the people developed even more ingenious ways to preserve it. Some dug cisterns into the rock, lining them with clay so that rain, when it fell, would not vanish into the thirsty soil. Others crafted gourds and clay jars sealed with pitch, storing drops that could last through drought. Water was more than substance, it was spirit. Songs were sung before it was drunk, prayers whispered when it was poured. To treat it carelessly was unthinkable, for each drop carried the weight of life itself. In every movement of water, whether a trickle, a flood, or a hidden spring, they saw the hand of the divine. Food, too, became a reflection of patience and creativity. Seeds were roasted, ground, and stored in woven baskets sealed with resin. Roots were dried in the sun, then boiled when the season grew thin. Meat was smoked and preserved, lasting months beyond the hunt. Families gathered to work together, women grinding seeds on stone slabs, men repairing nets for the next chase, children learning through their small tasks. These labors were not chores, but rituals, each action tying them to survival, each meal reminding them of their place within the desert's harsh cycle. To eat was to honor the labor of many hands, and to share was to affirm the unity of the tribe. Spirituality touched every part of life, for the desert was more than land. It was sacred space. Each mountain was a guardian, each spring a gift, each animal a teacher. Ritual dances honored the spirits of rain, fire, and wind. Ceremonies marked the passing of seasons, the coming of children, the success of hunts. These were not mere traditions but acts of balance, ensuring harmony between the people and the world around them. In song and dance, in prayer and offering, they affirmed their bond to the desert and to the powers that moved unseen across it. Their survival was not only physical, it was spiritual, bound to a faith that gave meaning to endurance. Through it all, the desert remained unchanging in its demands. It tested the people with hunger, with thirst, with heat, and with cold. Yet in each trial lay the chance to grow stronger, to deepen the bond with the land, to pass on another story to the children gathered around the fire. They endured not because the desert was kind, but because they learned to listen, to adapt, and to live in respect. Their story was not of conquering the land, but of walking with it, step by step, generation by generation. And in that long walk, across endless sands and silent nights, they carved a legacy that still whispers in the winds of the desert today. Through it all, the desert remained unchanging in its demands. It tested the people with hunger, with thirst, with heat, and with cold. Yet in each trial lay the chance to grow stronger, to deepen the bond with the land, to pass on another story to the children gathered around the fire. They endured not because the desert was kind, but because they learned to listen, to adapt, and to live in respect. Their story was not of conquering the land, but of walking with it, step by step, generation by generation. And in that long walk, across endless sands and silent nights, they carved a legacy that still whispers in the winds of the desert today. The desert was never conquered, and it was never tamed. It remained vast, merciless, and unpredictable. Yet the people who lived within its boundaries did not vanish. They endured by weaving their lives into its very fabric. They learned its rhythm as one learns a song, repeating each verse until it became part of memory. To them, survival was not a battle won, but a harmony achieved. Their footsteps joined with the wind, their voices with the silence, their breath with the endless horizon. They did not shape the desert into something new. The desert shaped them, and in doing so, gave them a strength that no hunger or thirst could ever take away. The children of the desert carried these lessons forward. They listened at night when elders spoke of ancient hunts and hidden springs. They watched as mothers gathered plants with careful hands, as fathers tracked animals with patience. They learned to wait, to endure, to share, and to honor. Each story carried across generations was more than history. It was instruction, a lifeline for those not yet born. In this way, memory became the most powerful tool of survival, a bridge that stretched across centuries. The desert taught that nothing endured alone, not even knowledge, for it had to be shared, spoken, and lived. Though time passed and the world changed, the wisdom of the desert never faded. Paths once walked by bare feet became roads, and new tools arrived with new people. Yet beneath it all, the same truths remained. Water was still precious, fire still sacred, patience still necessary. The people had learned these lessons so deeply that they could not be erased. Even when strangers came, bringing different ways and heavier burdens, the desert itself held the memory of its first teachers. Every rock marked by petroglyphs, every soot-stained cave, every story still spoken was proof that survival here was not chance, but choice. The desert also gave a gift beyond survival: perspective. To live where life clung so thinly was to understand the value of every breath, every drop, every grain of food. It taught humility, for no person could claim mastery over it. It taught gratitude, for every gift was fleeting. And it taught resilience, for only those willing to bend with the storm could rise again after it passed. These were not lessons for the desert alone. They were truths for all of life. The desert was a mirror, showing the raw truth of existence stripped of comfort, where meaning was found in endurance, in respect, and in the bonds of community. Even now, when modern roads cut through canyons and machines reach where feet once struggled, the echoes remain. The winds still carry whispers of the old songs. The stones still bear carvings of long-ago hunts. The stars still shine with the same guidance that once led travelers across endless plains. To walk into the desert today is to walk into memory itself, to feel the presence of those who endured before. Their shadows may no longer fall across the sands, but their wisdom lingers in every silence, every gust of wind, every hidden spring. And so, the story of survival in the harshest deserts of North America is not only about the past, it is about a way of seeing, a way of living that transforms hardship into strength and emptiness into meaning. The native peoples who walked these lands carried with them not only tools and traditions, but a vision of balance between human life and the natural world. Their legacy is not lost. It still waits, written in stone, sung in stories, whispered by the desert itself. To remember them is to remember the truth that survival is not domination, but respect, not conquest, but harmony. And in that harmony, the desert remains alive, not as an enemy, not as a prison, but as a teacher whose lessons never end.